Welcome to Implement This with Microsoft Business Solutions MVP Britta Rexstead and co-host Matthew C. Anderson, where we have an insider's discussion around the things we consider when implementing Dynamics 365. In today's episode, sponsored by Analogic, Britta and I talk about our favorite things when implementing Salesforce automation solution. Maplytics by Analogic is a market-leading, certified for Microsoft Dynamics 365 geoanalytical mapping app. Maplytics empowers users with powerful map visualizations and routing capabilities within Dynamics CRM to drive better sales, improve business processes, and engage the right customers at the right time. Maplytics now works with Dynamics 365 version 9.0 and Dynamics 365 app for mobile and tablet. Analogic is a leading Microsoft Gold Dynamics CRM ISV, delivering best-in-class Dynamics 365 solutions, as well as cost-effective and high-quality programming services. We thank Analogic for their sponsorship, and now on with the show. So here we are with another episode of Implement This. Hi, Britta. How are you?
Good, Matt. How are you doing?
I am doing pretty well. I have a proposition for you as far as what we cover in today's episode.
Shoot.
Well, I would like to do a little bit of a grab bag of some of our favorite things that are implemented as part of a Salesforce automation deployment.
Oh, cool.
So maybe just like beyond the simple, leads and opportunities and accounts. Yes, of course we're going to do those things. But a few of the capabilities that we have in the Dynamics platform that maybe every organization isn't implementing, but are worth taking a look at if you are doing Salesforce automation.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great topic.
Okay. So I think the first thing that I want to call out is doing QuickCreate. Mm-hmm. And so specifically, QuickCreate forms. Do you agree? Do you like QuickCreate forms?
I do. I really like QuickCreate forms. I'm actually one of those people who's always frustrated that activities aren't available in QuickCreate yet, because that just feels so natural that they should be QuickCreate.
Yeah.
But especially for salespeople, you have a short attention span.
Yeah.
I think that the natural inclination when you start customizing CRM is you come from another world where you never had all the fields you needed, and now you can have all the fields you've ever wanted. And so you give them this form with 150 ridiculous fields on it.
Yeah.
And then your salespeople's eyes glaze over and they stop paying attention. And so QuickCreate really helps focus that energy and say, okay, if I'm just going to get 3 or 4 pieces of information out of them, what am I going to get? Mm-hmm. And you're more likely to get what you're asking for if you don't ask for as much.
Yeah.
And so QuickCreate really helps focus that process.
Yeah, well, and especially for me, it's when there are lookup fields that you're going to have on a form, an important one, say that opportunity form, and you don't want people to get sidetracked with a bunch of extra busy work that they have to go and do. If you do have those lookup fields where your salesperson is going to have to not just pick something from it, but create that, a contact is a great example there. Mm-hmm. Using QuickCreate keeps them focused on what they're actually doing. So even in the context of an opportunity form where as you're working with that, you may have to have a lot more stuff that gets filled out by necessity. You don't have to have people navigating away from one record to another and then remembering to hit the back button to deal with what they had before, or heaven forbid have a pop-up that they have to deal with. That's been a long problem area for people, and just being able to stay paying attention when you have those pop-ups or re-navigation or what have you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really good for that. I love that we're getting into a space that even if you don't know how to code, if you think about it clearly, you can do a really good job of making sure that the form your user is looking at is in context of what they're doing at the moment. Mm-hmm. It used to be that we just built systems and then they just had to know, well, today I'm doing this, I'm wearing this hat, so this is how I use it. But between mobility and just all of the options that we have with form customization and other things, it's really exciting that we can be so contextual to what they're doing in the moment, but you have to remember to go back and think that way.
Yeah.
Because if you're used to just building it and thinking from a reporting standpoint, okay, I know I need these 70 fields. Mm-hmm. You're not thinking about in the moment, okay, they're on the phone, so they're distracted. They're dealing with somebody. I am not their highest priority, being the system right now. What 3 pieces of information do I need to get, or what needs to be top of mind? And that's where business process flows are so exciting, is you can have that quick little peak of, okay, this is what I have to get next. I have to remember to grab this piece of information or fill something in.
Yeah, and another aspect of it, and this can get lost in the shuffle when you're doing your initial implementation, is that when you make that QuickCreate form, you have a fresh canvas that you're working with, and even if, say, an account record has 10 required fields on it, you can set up a QuickCreate form, and assuming it would be acceptable or allowable, you could only include, say, 3 of those 10 required fields. Those 3 would be required, but it will create the record without all of the other stuff along with it. Mm-hmm. So the first one that comes to mind is something like an SIC code or a NAICS code. Anybody who's a salesperson who's working on a deal doesn't want to have to think through going and looking that up and finding it. And you can use that QuickCreate form as a way for them to create the account record. And then you can even set up something like a view later on for accounts without a NAICS code to have either an admin or remind that person later, use a workflow to send the reminder sometime later. But it doesn't interrupt the process that they have right there. And it gets around the fact that, hey, yeah, it is a required field, but it's not required at that exact point in time for you to be able to move things forward with putting it into the system.
I like it a lot better than, I don't know about you, but I had a season in my career where making everyone their own form was a solution to every problem. And I cringe from my former self. And if you are not cringing listening, then please heed our warning. That is not the solution to your problems. Mm-hmm. Please do not make a whole bunch of forms for things. There's so many reasons for that, and we'll get into that later in other episodes. But let's just take our word for it. It's a huge nightmare, huge amount of upkeep, not worth the trouble.
Yeah, and let's just be clear. The capability of multiple forms is important. It's powerful. There is a reason for it, but that's not the solution to every time you need something to look or feel a little bit different or provide a slightly different experience.
Oh, absolutely. I think I had a point that I had 12 users and 6 account forms. That life just does not make sense, Matt. There's just so much pain and suffering. Just not worth it when you have that many account forms. And so I like that QuickCreate can really give what at times I was trying to get to, or I didn't want them to be distracted. I didn't want them to be focused, or I didn't want them to be unfocused. And so QuickCreate keeps you from giving up your whole usability account form, because there are things you need as reference material that you don't need real quick when you're throwing in a phone number and a first name, but you do need to come back to later. Mm-hmm. And so I like that QuickCreates are one more way to get away from having a bunch of forms.
Yeah.
Makes life a lot easier.
Excellent. So maybe we call it a wrap on QuickCreate and move on to the next one?
Sure, sounds good.
Okay. So the next one that I had in my mind is specifically the mapping of fields between entities. Now, this is somewhat related to QuickCreate because oftentimes there is a relationship between a couple of different records if you're doing it in the context of a form. But this is one of those key pieces where you can create an entity or your own custom fields in your implementation, and it's really easy to skip over the step of mapping the same field between 2 different entities.
Mm-hmm. So I have something to admit, and that is I'm not going to put a number of years on it. I'm just going to say it was way too late in my career that I figured out how to do mapping. Embarrassingly late. The other embarrassingly late part is I learned it from a client who was awesome.
There you go.
So I'm just going to put that out there as a show of humility and talk through, for those of you who are like me, who are getting too far in your career to not know what mapping is, let's take a pause and talk about how to actually do that. It's actually really easy. You have the ability to map any, is it any relationships? I know it's all the one-to-manys. Probably not many-to-manys.
Not a many-to-many.
But one-to-many going either direction. So, and you see this pop up naturally on like account and contact and things like that. If you ever open a record or you create, let's say you're on an account and create a new contact and some data is already populated for you, that was mapping. But you get to do it yourself if you want. And so in the solution, you just go into either side of that one-to-many relationship, and there is a tab over on the left nav. So when it first opens, you're looking at things like cascade rules and kind of the nitpicky things about the relationship itself. But if you go over to the left navigation in that little pop-up window, there's something called mapping. And it's really, really nice because you open that up and you say, these are all the fields that should auto-populate.
Yep.
And it's beautiful, and users love it. And you should use it if you possibly can. Not every field is going to work that way, and not every field is going to make sense to map, because sometimes you can't make assumptions.
Right.
You don't want to assume things. But anywhere you can, it's just such a win.
A classic frustrating one where it could make sense to map it, but in most cases it doesn't, is on that account to contact, the primary phone number. You know what? The primary phone number should almost never actually be populated from the account to the contact, because they have their own primary phone number.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
So that's one. But what this does is, for a lot of those other fields that might otherwise go unpopulated, say the full address for that contact, this drives more accuracy and consistency. It puts it in there, and maybe you put a different suite number, or you might have some additional information as far as what you want to tweak a little bit here or there, but the majority of it is just going in there for you. So it just kind of, it feels right from a user perspective when you have stuff on, say like the lead, and there are custom fields that you have on the lead, those should populate over the opportunity. And if you have the same fields on the lead and the opportunity, they don't automatically map, because the system just doesn't know that it's supposed to. So it give those little things, those little wins for the team that's using the system when you're setting it up. So definitely go through and do those mapping of fields.
Yeah, and have balance with it, because I think it makes a lot of sense when you're carrying data forward. So forward in a process, like for example, if you've already collected it on the lead, makes perfect sense to bring that data onto the opportunity, because now the lead's going to go away and kind of be hidden in the background. What I would say to be careful of, sometimes there's a temptation, especially when you're newer, to duplicate and put the same fields on a bunch of records and then maintain them all. And that usually comes from a lack of confidence in getting to data. So if you don't know how to confidently map views, or your users don't know how to borrow fields through relationships to put in your view, or there's some lack of confidence, usually the design can handle it. You rarely have to duplicate the same data across multiple records in the system. That's usually not necessary. If you find yourself doing that, your design skills are probably lacking a little bit, and go out to the community and figure out how other people get that done. There are sometimes when a field should naturally be in a lot of places, and that tends to be a lot of relationships. I feel like a lot of times the lookup will be the same across multiple records, and that does make sense to carry forward.
Yep.
But if I'm putting the same cell phone number on 4 different records in the system, I probably didn't architect it right. So don't use mapping as your excuse to build your sales system poorly, because then all of a sudden you've got all this data that isn't being rigorously maintained, and so your data integrity goes down, and just kind of creates this whole problem that gets overly complicated.
Well, and that leads to another one of the things I wanted to make sure to bring up here is leveraging QuickView forms wherever you can. So, QuickView forms being when you have a lookup field as a reference, you can display information from the parent record in the form of the child record. So, let's say, using that account and contact example, maybe for that contact, you want to see some information, maybe that industry or, SIC code, NAICS code of the parent account. Now, there's one frame of mind where, let's just copy that data forward and put it onto the contact, which becomes its own nightmare of data to try to keep straight later on. And what if it, some of that information changes for the parent account, and you have to go into all the contacts and change it there. Instead, you can use the QuickView form to be able to show that information, save the user from having to go click through to the parent account record, and also save the extra fields on the form and not having to have the data duplicated across.
Yeah, they're fantastic. So let's pause for people who are in an older version and don't have those quite yet. This, honestly, it's a huge reason to upgrade. Like this by itself even. I mean, I know it's hard to justify an upgrade, but if you... or sometimes it can be hard if it's not your budget and you've got to defend it and everything, but QuickView forms are one of those things I think are just gold. And that is the ability to kind of project that data. So anything you have a lookup for, you can pull whatever fields you want. I've even done it with views. So I've had views on another record, so when you can't quite extrapolate to get a complex relationship onto the form you want, you can use QuickView to get there. And so it really extends your reach and what data you can show somewhere. Really, really cool. The one thing I'll say, though, is you got to be careful with your user training and make sure that the users know that those fields are read-only. Because when I first rolled them out, I did not do a good job of pointing that out. I was an admin at the time, and my users would get really upset because it was broken, because now they can't enter a cell phone number for a contact anymore. When I need them to go to the contact record to edit the contact record, I was just helping them out by showing it. And so I commonly will put read-only in the title of that QuickView.
Okay.
Either I handle it in training, or I usually, if the interface can handle it, like, some places that's not appropriate, but some places it's okay to leave hints like that. And I like to leave the hint if I can, because it is a little bit confusing. It does feel like it should be a field, and then you go to click on it and it's stuck. Maybe not so much if your users don't edit their records anyway. If it's more of a read-only system, probably doesn't matter. But if your users are used to getting to edit those fields, they might get a little bit confused.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a great point. And I think there are some things you can do visually about where you actually have those on the page. If you have a series of fields that are all editable, and then if you drop a QuickView form into the middle of that and have more editable fields afterward, it's going to be confusing for the user. So, maybe have that in its own section of the form, within a tab, just so it's clear, these portions are the part that are read-only, or they're referenced from the account record or the opportunity record or whatever that related record is.
Yeah, titling can really help. Just putting some context. So say contact information or primary contact information, and then have the only thing in that little subsection B that read-only projected through.
Yeah.
Can really help a lot.
Yeah, and the other place where QuickView Forms does come into play is when you're looking at any of the hierarchy-enabled entities within Dynamics. When you're looking at those records within the hierarchy, the QuickView forms are the forms that are available as far as what information you're seeing about each of the records in the hierarchy. So keep in mind that those can be multi-purpose, and the other part is from a naming perspective, when you're giving them a name, if it's something that's going to be used as a reference in other views and not going to be very valuable on its own, try to make sure you take that into consideration with what the name is. Because when you're on the hierarchy view, people can choose between a handful of the different QuickView forms that are out there.
That's a great point. That's one I had not thought about as we're sitting here talking about QuickView forms.
Yeah, that's a lessons learned.
Lessons learned. It'll get you. Yeah, and it comes back to, there's really great value in naming things well, putting in descriptions well, and sometimes we move a little too fast and get a little too sloppy, and that's yet another reason why you want to slow down and name something instead of just naming it contact, because it's kind of about contacts. Thinking about the fact that there will be many of these, and you'll have to actually pick the right one at some point.
And then going back, I don't want to forget on the mapping of fields between entities. I know we jumped forward a bit there. But one thing to keep in mind is that if you are going to map across different entities, the field type is going to have to match up for you. So you can there are some slight variations that you can have in the field type, but the most straightforward and best practice is to have the exact same field type that's out there. The other thing that can be a bit of a gotcha if you don't think about this beforehand is anytime you're using option set fields, you want to use a global option set rather than an option set that's specific to that entity type itself. Because by using the global option set, it makes it very straightforward to be able to map between those. It understands, because it is the exact same set, how to be able to translate that information from one record to another. And that's one where if you, and this is probably a topic for another episode, but if you forget that kind of thing, or you don't consider whether it should be just for that entity or a global option set, you can cause yourself some trouble a little bit later on.
Oh, yeah. Lots of pain there, too. I think pretty much I'm trying to think if there's any kind of automation you can do on an option set if it's not global. I know workflows, you're just stuck. writing the ugliest workflow you've ever seen.
It is doable.
It's doable. I've done it. Trust me. But it's a bummer.
Yeah,
it's a huge bummer.
And there was a client actually pretty recently that I worked with this on. We ended up doing a little bit of custom code with a plugin that took care of that. I mean, they didn't really want to have to do the option of doing a plugin if they didn't have to, but the amount of work it was going to take to have and maintain this kind of ugly big workflow, it wasn't worth it. It was better for them to go with a little bit of code in that case.
And that can happen. There's a lot of reasons why your default should be global option sets. I mean, it's not every single time. There are reasons to do just on the entity option sets, but yeah, that's probably a whole episode unto itself.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've gone through a few of our favorite things as far as Salesforce automation implementations. I think, we can probably come back and hit another episode of this at some point in the future because there's a lot more I want to get to. Yeah,
definitely. I think I still want to really get into the data and incentivizing salespeople because they're very coin operated. So there's some fun psychology to tap into there.
Okay, sounds good. Well, let's sign off for this one, and I'll hear you on another episode.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Implement This with Britta Rexted and Matthew C. Anderson. Do you have a business problem you'd like us to discuss on the show? Reach us through our website, implementthis.org, where you can also subscribe to the podcast. We're on Twitter, too. Britta is at MacGyverCRM, and I'm at MC Anderson. Thanks so much for listening.